2022.
I'm Tori Bedford. Tonight on Greater Boston, the city is clearing out encampments from Mass and Cass again. Is this approach working? Then I'll talk to a family friend of a Massachusetts family still stuck in Gaza. They say they're running out of food, water, and time. Progress is being made. That was a statement from Mayor Michelle Wu at Mass and Cass today as city workers took down tents and encampments for the third day, trying to help the people living there find shelter.
This is an issue that we are never going to give up on. We see this as a community of people who we are determined to ensure are moving forward with their recovery journey and also contributing to the community and plugging back into the families they love, the neighborhoods they grew up in, and this city that they want to be a part of.
The city has been working to take down the more than 75 tents and personal items of the some 90 people living in the area, but not all of them see the change as positive. Cassie Hurd was helping people at Mass and Cass today with me during the cleanup. She's the executive director of the nonprofit Material Aid and Advocacy program, and she joins me now. Cassie, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Seen you for hours today.
Yes.
You were actually helping people. I was just watching and observing, but
an important role.
Yeah, I guess so. So I left before you. You stayed how much long? A couple hours today. I think Atkinson Street was pretty much cleared out. That's where the biggest concentration of the tents were. I think there were maybe one or two that were coming down. What did you see after that?
Yeah, so we left Atkinson Street when the street cleaner was headed up and down and police had blockaded off the street. We headed, myself and legal observer partners and legal partners from the ACLU headed up the street to check in. There were about 2 to 3 dozen folks on the corner of Bradston Street.
Which is just around the corner.
Which is just around the corner. Unclear of where they were supposed to go tonight, where they would be allowed to survive outside without being criminalized, and just really unsure of what tonight's cold night would bring for them. It
was freezing today.
Yes, absolutely freezing, hence the hoodie.
Yeah, well, a lot of people in general, when we have inclement weather, or it's freezing, people will be more likely to go into shelter, right?
Yes, absolutely. People are doing what they need to do to survive. And so I think while potentially tonight, most people will go into shelter, that won't be true of every night, right? It fluctuates. And what we know is the shelter system as we know it does not work for people, which is why they were outside in tents. That was safer and worked better for them of the few to little options that were available to them.
The reason for this is because of this outcry and heightened sense of danger over the summer about just the public safety hazards in tents and rising crime and sex trafficking, which has been an issue. And the mayor was saying ahead of the winter weather, we want to take down those tents. It's not safe for people to be in tents, and so they've moved. I just got off the phone with a representative from her office who said that they've now moved around 90 people into shelter who were previously living in the tents. This situation where there was this concentration of people living in tents in that area, in this intersection, nobody wants that, right? And we've been here before where we've had these clearings and the city has moved people out, and one of the last most successful ones was in 2022, the beginning of 2022, and you were there as well, where they were moving people into transitional housing. There was a longer term plan, right? How does this one differ from attempts to clear the area in the past or move people into a different direction or help people to kind of move along into housing?
Yeah, I think certainly on its face, this looks vastly different from, say, Operation Clean Sweep in 2019.
Under Marty Walsh.
Yes, yeah. Under Marty Walsh, where it was a multi-night police raid on unhoused people and people who use drugs in the area. And I think some may argue this is a gentler touch, but I would argue that sweeping people, regardless of the police presence, there's an abundance of peer-reviewed evidence that shows the harmful outcomes, especially when, like today, there weren't necessarily long-term plans in place to support people, right? Shelter is, by nature, night to night. Even at the new 30-bed site they have created, Once someone either is housed or moves on, or it does not work for them, or they are told they have to leave or are barred, that is not being replaced. So that is not necessarily 30 beds that are going online. And to be clear, shelter is not necessarily beds either. There will be people sleeping on the floor, which, I think many could argue, I would argue, is not necessarily safer. People know what's safest for them. And absolutely everyone should be in housing. People deserve housing that meets their needs with whatever family configuration they have, whether that be a partner, a friend, loved one, a pet, as we saw today, but that isn't what's being offered.
Right, we spoke to a woman who had 2 dogs, and she's now moved into shelter, but the shelter, it's a low-threshold shelter, but she's not allowed to have her dogs there, and so they were moved in. I think there were 3 dogs in total that were moved along to stay with family members from Mass and Cass. I wanted to talk about this one woman that I spoke to earlier. I think you spoke to her as well, Ayokai Ortiz Simmons. She had left briefly. She had a tent. She had been she's got a bed at a shelter, but she said that in the transitional housing that she's been provided, she has roommates and they're very messy, and she has debilitating OCD, and she can't live there in that kind of filth, and so she doesn't stay there. She stays there for the minimum of how long she has to stay there. So she left. We kind of talked to her today, and when I came up to her, this was an interaction that we had while she was kind of picking through some things that had been left behind in this big pile before they were carted off to be taken into the trucks.
I went to South Bay to get something to make for lunch. Thank you. Left somebody watching my tent, and I couldn't tell you where the hell that person is.
So you came back and...
They were taking down my
Do you have anything left? Is this what they're letting you pick through?
and I picked it out of the garbage.
So she was very confused. I think, she has a shelter placement, and she was able to recover some of her things, but she is someone who just didn't feel like she really had a better option. When we asked her what would be ideal for you, she was saying, to have my own room in a rooming house or my own housing of some kind. And that is what the city had worked towards, last year. But right now it's not available. Right now, her only option is shelter.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to people know what is best for them. People know what they need, and that isn't what is being offered. I think there are a lot of stopgap measures. And offerings that are sort of towards the end of disappearing people from the street, right? And sort of the illusion of movement or progress, but actually isn't meeting people's needs, right? And I think what you're sharing is right. She's going to be in a space for the minimum amount of time because she's aware she should keep it, right? Now that she would be criminalized for surviving outside, she would potentially be arrested under this camping ban, under Mayor Wu's camping ban, but also knows it's not going to work for her. And I think when we think about how challenging cohabitation is, to be told you need to move in with people who, it sounds like from the beginning she knows this is not going to work out well. So I think really the city needs to listen to what people are saying they want and need, and that is where solutions will actually come. And we know, again, there's an abundance of evidence, including from some of what happened in 2022, right? That lower threshold housing that is decoupled from sobriety serves many people, but that people need to have, be able to retain their autonomy and make decisions and have control over their space, their safety, having visitors or folks who are keeping each other safe able to be in their space, and that isn't what's being offered.
I know the city works very closely with several nonprofits. They work with Elliott, they work with Victory, harm reduction programs. they work so closely on getting people into transitional housing and then permanent housing and this network. I talked to a psychologist this morning who works with people. She's at Mass General and she works with people who are unhoused at Mass and Cass, and she was saying that she's concerned about finding her clients or accessing people now that people have been or will be displaced throughout the city in different areas.
Absolutely. I mean, I think already in the past few weeks and the weeks prior, it's been challenging to know where people are because people don't have, access to phones. They are now being pushed out of the city into the suburbs. Transportation then becomes an issue because of the state of our public transportation. And that, again, evidence and history here in Boston shows that sweeps such as this, and yes, it absolutely is a sweep, disconnect people from care, from providers, from community, all who, would be responding to overdoses, would be providing daily medication, and that will no longer be able to happen for folks, right? This should not be surprising, as there is so much evidence showing that sweeps such as this only increase death and negative outcomes for people, and people need to be connected and remain in community and with their providers.
Right. I've reached out to the city, and we're working together on booking the mayor and the coordinated response director, Tanya Del Rio, to come on the show next week and kind of talk about their longer term plans. I know that they're really working and hoping to fold in some of that harm reduction and some of the work with those nonprofits, and that is a really big priority of her administration. What are your concerns for the next, by the time that I get to talk to them, or within the next couple of weeks or the next month, right? What are some kind of the concerns that you're thinking about after this?
The disconnection from care, right? The overdose risk only increases, as people are disconnected from their communities, from care, from those who can respond if needed. That a significant number of people, or even if one person gets picked up because of this ordinance, right, as a result of the action Mayor Wu.
You mean arrested?
Yes.
Yeah.
Both Mayor Wu and I will say the city council, right, approved this, that can have deadly consequences, if not just be counterproductive towards people moving forward. And, in terms of housing, in terms of jobs, even in terms of accessing some treatment, having that quarry there, and also just extremely traumatic for people.
Yeah, the ordinance only technically just went into effect, but obviously this has been ongoing in terms of preparing people, helping people to get into shelter. I think this morning they said we've got 52 people, as of Monday, and then now it's something like 90 later, a couple hours later. But they had been working with people, connecting with people, and kind of trying to do it at this kind of slow pace. I wonder if you've seen, though, in that time, any encampments kind of crop up. I know people were talking about people kind of moving off of like the on-ramp near Copley Square. People in their BU Bridge encampment, there was a fire there. There's an encampment in Stony Brook that I think is technically DCR land. Will people be dispersing into other encampments? I know there's something the mayor had predicted happening, and so they're hoping to enforce that throughout the city. But what do you predict that's going to look like? Yeah,
I think it's really hard to say. I think like with any community, right, there are those of us who are connected to each other, like within the community of people who, were surviving with each other on the Ave, there are different networks of folks, right? So who knows where people will go. I think people are in the immediate, like, we're on the corner of Broadston Street. Like, they were going to remain in community. It seemed like while they problem solved and safety planned with each other, I think it is likely that some folks will go to other encampments within the city or places where there's some public space where they're able to be. But people are well aware within the boundaries of the city, regardless of city or state property, that they could be arrested. So I do think we'll be seeing more people outside of the jurisdictional boundaries of the city of Boston, which again is really frightening just in terms of people's safety and what, other communities' response could potentially be.
Yeah, I spoke to a man, Aiden Chick, on Monday. He stays at a nearby shelter. He actually got kicked out of that shelter for 30 days, so he's in Quincy. He's coming back to the shelter. He also receives methadone treatment off of Bradston Street. And this is what he was like, this is not the first time that he has seen this or the city has seen this, and he does not think that it will be the last.
Yeah.
They'll just migrate. That's what the best way to put it. They migrate to another spot and another spot and another spot until they end up back at the spot they started at, which is how it happened before. They started here, then they went to the highway, then they went back there, and they so on and so forth over and over and over again.
So, I don't know. I mean, there's research to show that it doesn't necessarily work, but there's also this problem of this inflow of people coming in, right? And our entire state is overburdened. The shelter system is overburdened, and we're experiencing a homelessness crisis, a migrant family crisis. We can't even get in. We don't have time to get into all of that, but I don't know. I mean,
I think the challenge is that solutions may not be politically palatable, and I think it takes political will and courage to say that we are going to invest in people and the solutions that we know will best support people, right? We know that housing is, I don't think I have to say this, unaffordable to, I would argue, the majority of people, right? We need rent control, we need protections for people who are currently housed but precariously housed, right? Yeah. We need truly affordable, low-threshold housing for folks, for people of different family configurations. We need an expansion of harm reduction. We need overdose prevention centers. We need to expand existing syringe service programs, community-based programs. Like,
there's so many things that we need. Yes, Cassie,
right?
I wish we had more time to talk. Thank you so much, Cassie Hurd. Thank you for joining us.
Appreciate you.
Thanks. Next up, trapped near the Egyptian border in Gaza, a Medway family is begging the United States for help. Abood Okal, Wafaa Abuzayda, and their 1-year-old son, Yousef, were visiting family before the Hamas attacks on Israel that killed more than 1,400 people last month. Now they're under constant bombardment from Israeli airstrikes in Gaza, where nearly 8,800 people have been killed since the fighting began, including 3,400 children. That's according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Nearly a month into the war, Abood and his family are running out of food, water, and medicine as they try to flee the fighting. They're among several hundred Americans trapped in Gaza, and they've tried crossing the border into Egypt several times, following instructions from the State Department. Each time, they were turned away. But a new development has given the family reason to hope. The Rafah border crossing, where the family is staying, has been temporarily opened to let some refugees and aid workers escape. For more on Abood and his family's situation in Gaza, I'm joined by family friend and attorney Sammy Nabulsi. Sammy, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you heard from them today. I've been WhatsApp messaging with Abood a little bit. How are they doing?
Not great, not great. Their circumstances continue to be extremely dangerous and dire. Abood was telling me this morning that they ran out of drinking water again for the entire house. They're staying in a single family home with 40 other people. They ran out of drinking water and he had to walk a few hours just to find a clean drinking water source. They're only able to walk away with 1 gallon of water for the entire house of 40 people. For the entire house of 40 people. Complicating things today, of course, is the news that the Rafah crossing opened for foreign nationals, but United States citizens were not on that list, despite communications they had received from the State Department in the last 24 hours. So this up and down on top of their dire circumstances, trying to access water, food, fuel, medicine, it's extremely unfortunate. It's extremely unfortunate.
Yeah, so that was a list that Hamas released of about 500 people who are allowed to cross through from the area of Gaza, like southern Gaza where they're staying.
That's right.
Your relationship with them, you're a family friend, and my understanding when we started talking, you're an attorney, so I was like, oh, you're their attorney, but this isn't your area of expertise, really. You're a real estate attorney, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
this is not the work I do. This is not the work I do. I'm completely overwhelmed and frustrated. I'm frustrated. And the reason I'm so frustrated is this family has done everything they've been asked to do. Everything they've been asked to do. They've been in contact every day with the U.S. embassies in Cairo and Jerusalem. They've been in contact with the State Department every day. We've been in touch with every U.S. senator in Massachusetts, congressional delegation. They fled northern Gaza after the Israeli Defense Force mandated the evacuation to the south. And they've gone to the crossing now on 3 occasions at the instruction of State Department, and at every turn, the United States hasn't been there for them. They're still in Gaza. They're still under constant bombardment. They're still going hungry. They're still going thirsty. And I, frankly, don't know what to do next. It's not my area of work, but I don't know what else we can do for them. I don't know what else we can do for them.
You've contacted several members of Congress. You've been in touch with the State Department. What do you hear back when you've made these requests?
I'm getting the same thing, which is that everyone's trying hard to figure it out, and the situation continues to be complex and fluid. My problem now that I'm having is we just watched hundreds of foreign nationals from other countries cross safely into Egypt today. And as of this moment, the Okal family, Abood, Wafaa, their 1-year-old son Yousef, they've received no information about a departure option safely into Egypt. We still don't know whether it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, or if it's going to happen.
I wanted to play this clip. Abood has been sending me these voice memos, is sending them to you as well via WhatsApp when he's had cell service, when it's possible. He also mentioned that, you know, when he goes out to talk on the phone, Wafaa was concerned because some people thought because he was doing that he was Hamas, and so that was creating more danger. So it's been incredibly hard to communicate with them on the ground.
That's right.
I wanted to play, though, something from an audio message that he sent last week. He was talking about there are constant bombings and airstrikes, and he feels that they are just growing closer and closer and more intense every single day.
Fear controls us, and no matter how strong one can be, fear for our lives, but most importantly, Yousef's lives does get to us in these times.
And Yousef is their 1-year-old son.
Right.
Who has become traumatized by this experience. I mean, they've said that he's really changed, and I don't know that he understands what's going on, but
I don't know that he does. The thing that I worry about Yousef now is that he's completely traumatized. Abood was telling me that at first, every time there were airstrikes or bombings, that would wake him up in the middle of the night. But now, Yousef, who's only 1 year old, is now waking up in the middle of the night screaming, inconsolable, even during periods of calm. Even during periods of calm. That kid is completely traumatized. And on top of it, remember, he's 1. His main source of nutrition right now is milk. That's his main source of nutrition. And 4 or 5 days ago, they ran out of milk. They've not been able to find any milk for Yousef.
And you're checking in with them every morning. Last time we spoke, you said you haven't been sleeping, you know, every day. You wake up from 1 or 2 hours of sleep and you'll ask them how they're doing.
Yeah.
How has that been I mean, I know there's so many people here. You know, we've got 500, 600 American citizens who are now trapped in Gaza, along with all the other foreign nationals. For the people at home, just trying to check in with limited communication that you have, how has that been?
It's hard, and it's really hard because given the circumstances, given the airstrikes every night that are getting closer, given the fact that they're having a tough time finding drinking water and food, every morning when I text them, I ask them, what's your food situation? Do you have water? Are the airstrikes getting closer? Have you heard anything from the State Department? I'm asking them these pointed questions, but really the question I'm asking every morning is, are you alive? And I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for them to say something so we know that we now have another day to keep fighting, keep talking to senators, keep telling their story, keep talking to the State Department in hopes that someone finally prioritizes this issue and gets these families out.
A gate is controlled by Hamas, which is what the U.S. government has said repeatedly. They've blamed Hamas for the delay in getting American citizens out. Obviously, this list that was released of other countries, citizens from other countries that were able to be, that was released by Hamas. If the U.S. government is struggling with this and saying they're doing their best, I mean, what are you proposing that they do?
So there's been a couple things, right? One is the United States announced yesterday that they had entered into an agreement, 4-way agreement, mediated by Qatar. And that agreement was between the United States, Egypt, Israel, and Hamas. And that led to the creation of this list and the opening of the Rafah crossing for these foreign nationals. The one thing that I'm asking for, but I'm not seeing, is for the United States to prioritize the safe and immediate departure of U.S. citizens. If we're not at that table bargaining for the release of our citizens, what are we bargaining for? Who are we representing in those conversations? I don't understand how the United States walks away announcing an agreement, and then here we are today, foreign nationals from 8 countries that are not the United States are sending their citizens into Egypt. The second thing I've been asking for is if we can't figure out a way to get these families out, then we need to turn to our partner who we're providing money and weapons to and say no airstrikes in Rafah, at least until the Americans get out. No one will get back to me on that request.
Are you hopeful for this family?
I'm trying to have hope. I mean, I'm encouraged. I will say this. I'm encouraged by the fact that the Rafah crossing was open today, because that's the first time we've seen that, I think, since the beginning of the conflict, at least for pedestrians to cross into Egypt. I'm hopeful. I'm encouraged by some of the statements that have been made coming from President Biden and the Secretary in the last couple hours today. I'm hopeful that maybe there's a window here. Maybe there's a breakthrough coming. But at the same time, we've had 4 false starts before today. And I am still a bit concerned that as of this moment, the United States has not communicated to them or me about a departure option or even a timeline.
Yeah. Every time I talk to Abood, I think he's just trying to maintain, like you said, that sense of hope. And he mentioned in this other audio message that he sent that Wafaa always says that angels are protecting them, that they have a guardian angel. And a kind of guardian angel, I think, came to their door. He's been sending me pictures of this kitten that appeared and has become Yousef's best friend and is really like this one little thing that has made this 1-year-old have any kind of comfort or solace. I wanted to play this clip that he sent me about that.
Yesterday, out of nowhere, a kitten showed up at our front door and clearly belongs to someone. She had a collar on. We took her in, and Yousef loves cats. He loves animals. We have a dog back home in Medway, Lily, and she's staying with friends, luckily, looking after her. And so this kitten kept Yousef pretty happy, again, trying to shield him from all the trauma that comes with all the airstrikes.
I mean, just to think of them having a dog back in Medway and being trapped in this war zone is crazy to me, you know, and I don't know, like there's so many individual stories like this, right? And so much confusion. And to hear these big statistics about all of these deaths, it's so horrific. And it kind of takes, this just reminded me, I guess, of the humanity of it in a way.
Yeah, they're just your typical American family. They live in a suburb of Boston. Abood works for a pharmaceutical company based in Cambridge. They got a kid, they got a big backyard, they have a dog named Lily. They're US citizens. They work here, they pay their taxes here, they vote here. There's no reason or explanation for why they're not in Massachusetts right now.
Okay. Sammy Nabulsi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Tori Bedford. Good night.